Welcome, class, to Chapter 11 of our session. We're going to be talking about basic cryptography for this week. We're going to talk about some of the main categories for encrypting our data and how the data or the information is also decrypted. You're going to be introduced to some common terminology dealing with cryptography. So some common terms you may see in your readings for Chapter 11. You may see encryption. You may see decryption, you may see clear text, plain text, ciphertext, algorithms, or your cryptographic algorithms. So in Chapter 11, you're going to be introduced to some new terminology. So fret not, but these terminologies are going to help because in our next session, which is Chapter 12, is also going to build on Chapter 11. So when we talk about cryptography, what we are actually talking about is a mean for scrambling our data so that unattended persons is not able to retrieve that information or able to decipher, so to speak, that information. So in Chapter 11, there are three categories that we're going to be introduced to, or three different types of cryptographic algorithms. We're going to talk about what is a hash, which is a process for encrypting our data or scrambling our data, and a means that it produces a value, and that value is compared against another value which should be the same when that same information is encrypted, and those two values are compared. Now, when we use the hash algorithm, or when we talk about the hash algorithm for encrypting our data, there is no means for decrypting that information back to its original form. The hash algorithm is solely just to compare, to make sure that information is producing the same value to show that it has not been tampered with. So that is one type of algorithm that we're going to look at in Chapter 11. We also going to talk about what we call a symmetric algorithm, and that is where your information is encrypted or scrambled, and the same value of the same key, what we call a key, is also used to decrypt that information or to unscramble that information. So we're going to talk about symmetric algorithm. And then the third category that we're going to talk about is what we call asymmetric algorithm or asymmetric cryptographic algorithm. And that is where you have a pair of keys. We have what is called a public key, which is a value used for unscrambling that data. And then we have what is called a private key. So in your readings for Chapter 11, you're going to see under all three categories, you're going to have different types of algorithms, but there are three general categories. You got your hash algorithms, you have your symmetric, and your asymmetric algorithms. Then the last area of Chapter 11, we're going to look at the various ways that we can use cryptographic algorithms. So those are all of the topics discussed in Chapter 11. So in your readings, I would advise you to just kind of take your time and read through Chapter 11, because a lot of the basic terminology in Chapter 11 is also going to help you in chapter 12, which is our next week's session. In Chapter 12, we're going to look at advanced cryptography. So it is very important to make sure that as you read through Chapter 11 that you pay attention to the three categories, and then the different type of algorithms that can fall in those three categories. And if you look here on the overhead, I do have the exam objectives that are mapped to the Security Plus. So there are only three discussed in Chapter 11. The first objective is 4.3, is to be able to explain the importance of data security, which we've been talking about for the last 11 chapters. And then 6.1, we're going to summarize general cryptography concepts. And then 6.2 is to use and apply appropriate cryptographic tools and products. So those are all of the topics that we're going to discuss or look at in Chapter 11 to kind of lay a foundation for when we start Chapter 12. If you look in this week's module in your to-do list, there is also a video lecture there, and you also have lecture notes in your to-do list to help you in reading in Chapter 11. And like I forestated, there's a lot of new terminology, new concept discussed in Chapter 11. So once again, I would advise you to kind of just take your time in reading through Chapter 11, because it does lay the foundation for Chapter 12. So once again, have happy readings in Chapter 11, and I will see you on next week in Chapter 12.